Hello everybody, Greg here again. So this video is a kind of appendix or add-on to tutorial 2, which was a video about the Stoccata thrust from Grassi's fencing system. This video is really a theoretical video rather than a training one, but it's useful to try to understand the technique of the Stoccata and to help to diagnose possible problems that you might have with it. And the focus of this video is going to be comparing Grassi's late 16th century Stoccata with the later period Stoccata from various masters in the 18th, 19th and into 20th and 21st centuries, in fact. So what we're going to do is we're going to compare these two weapons and how they were used. So this one is of course a rapier, a late 16th century model of rapier, Italian, and this is what could be called either a small sword or a dueling sword from the late 18th and 19th centuries. So we're going to start by analysing this weapon, and the Stoccata was this, which is quite different from the earlier period Stoccata. Okay, so this weapon has a different body stance and a different guard posture, which is what leads to the different version of the Stoccata. So I'm going to insert a couple of diagrams here which show the guard posture and the foot positioning, and then I'm going to demonstrate this in action. Okay, so I'll take the guard posture, which is something like this, and the Stoccata is like so. And then the covering, just going straight back. So again, so there's one thing that's in common with the earlier style, which is that the sword leads the action. So the sword is extended towards the target, and then the thrust is performed. But the underlying mechanic behind this is very different. If I show without the sword, the guard posture is like this, looking at the camera. So the body is very much profiled and the weight is carried on the back leg. So when I perform the thrust with an empty hand, in this case, the hand extends the sword, and then we actually spring, launch or catapult the body forwards with the back leg. Okay, so this is acting like a spring to launch the attack. And then we recoil the spring, the back leg, in order to recover from the attack. The body and the sword arm are essentially holding the weapon steady and doing the targeting, but this is what's really powering the attack. Okay, so let's compare that with the 16th century Stoccata. Again, I'll insert a couple of diagrams to show the guard posture and the foot position. And I'll just very briefly demonstrate that at a slight angle in this direction. So I take my guard stance, extend the sword, and then I make the attack like so, and then cover back. So sword, push with the shoulder, and step. Now this is a different mechanic. The mechanic primarily involves the upper torso, the shoulder, and the sword arm, projecting the weapon forwards and delivering the power of the attack. And the front leg, the foot of course, steps forwards to extend and support that action, like so. So extend the arm, push with the body, and take a little step. This back leg is doing nothing. Okay, I mean, it straightens a little bit because your body changes shape, but it's not actually really delivering much by way of power. And if you read Giacomo di Grassi's Treatise of 1570 very carefully, all of that's contained in there. He never talks about this leg. and the only thing he mentions the front foot doing is extending a little forwards to support the action. All of the mechanics he describes are to do with the arm and the torso. Okay, so it's a little bit more like a sort of boxing punch or unarmed combat punch than it is like a more modern lunge. So what does this mean for your technique? One of the most common errors I see in people doing 16th century fencing is they're trying to attack using a more modern style of lunge. Okay, so they're using their legs to catapult themselves forwards, and they're not properly engaging the upper body in powering and therefore controlling the weapon. Why do we need this upper body mechanic? Because the sword's really big and heavy. Okay, this weighs very little. I mean, 500, maybe 600 grams. This particular sword, it weighs about 1,300, 1,400 grams. Okay, it's 2.5 times the weight of this. You have to use it in a different way. If you try to lunge in the modern style with this weapon, you can do it once, twice, maybe 3 times, but then you'll be completely tired and unable to control the weapon effectively and at your opponent's mercy. Okay? From a more biomechanical point of view, what happens if you make this lunge is, I'm actually going to use my dagger to demonstrate because it's a bit more convenient for the small space. If I take this more modern posture, I'm going to lunge in this direction, and I throw this out and catapult myself forwards with a big heavy sword, what tends to happen is everything gets pulled out of posture like this because there's a huge weight being carried at the end of the arm. The body goes stiff, there's an inefficient use of the muscles, the weapons flying around like this, out of control. It's really difficult to recover back out of the lunge. It's just generally sloppy technique, but also uncontrolled technique, which is tactically a really bad thing to do. So I'm just going to conclude by saying that the design of a weapon and the way it's used are obviously inseparable. There are various styles you can use a particular model of sword in. So for example, there's a Spanish rapier style, which is quite different from the Italian rapier style. But even then, it still takes account of the design of the weapon. If you try to apply the wrong period of technique to the wrong period weapon, you're going to get a mismatch where the body mechanics don't support what you're doing. Okay, so if you want to train 16th century swordsmanship, make 16th century movements, and then you will greatly increase the control of your weapon and also the tactical efficacy when it comes to free fencing. And I'll just finish off by saying, obviously, this applies the other way around too. If you try to use an 18th or 19th century weapon in the Grassi or other late 16th century styles, it will be a very inefficient way of doing it. I mean, you could, physically, you could stand in this guard position and you could make these thrusts, but they're relatively slow compared to these ones. And your opponent will be able to see them coming. You'll be quite uncovered. The sword's quite small, so it can't really protect your body like the bigger sword can. And it's actually a little bit less accurate, I would say, than this posture here, where you can use it a little bit like a sort of sniper rifle to pick off your opponent through the holes in their defense. Okay, so use the correct techniques for the correct weapon. And that's it. Hopefully that is of some interest to you. Please take a look at the diagrams and consider some of the points I have made in this video when you're trying to analyze your own Stoccata techniques. Okay, that's it. See you next time.